Many of the classic films produced in the 1980s are now available to stream, whether you're in the mood for a science fiction classic or a raunchy comedy vehicle. From an iconic John Hughes movie to the debut of a Spike Lee joint, and everything in between, here are the best 80s movies to watch on Netflix. If you're a Spike Lee fan, that means She's Gotta Have It's an essential watch. However, the film's impact goes far beyond Lee's own career. Yes, She's Gotta Have It is Lee's debut feature, and the film that helped him go on to make things like Do the Right Thing and Jungle Fever in the years that followed. But it's also a milestone for other reasons. Lee worked with a low budget, shot in black and white, and remained as creative as possible with few resources at a time when independent film was not yet the booming subculture it would later become. Plus, Lee's film helped blaze a trail for both his own filmography and for other black filmmakers to come. Perhaps no other filmmaker is more associated with the overall aesthetic of 80s movies than John Hughes, the writer-director who rose to prominence over the course of the decade and redefined the teen comedy genre forever. Though Hughes' filmography is actually rather diverse when taken as a whole, the mid to late 1980s were the time in which he very successfully honed in on a single target, the disaffected American teenager. Sadly, most of Hughes' teen comedy classics are not available on Netflix at the moment, but Ferris Bueller's Day Off is there for you to rewatch to your heart's content. The film follows the title character, played with undeniable charisma by Matthew Broderick, as he decides to take a sick day from school and turn it into the best vacation possible, all while his suspicious principal is hot on his trail. It's not the most realistic of Hughes' films, but it is one of the most delightful. In the 1970s, both Steven Spielberg and George Lucas had breakout hits that essentially invented the modern-day blockbuster. Spielberg with his stylish shark scarefest Jaws, and Lucas with his mythic space opera Star Wars. In the 1980s, the two friends joined forces to further reinvent mainstream commercial cinema with a series of films inspired by matinee adventure serials starring a dashing hero with a bullwhip and a fedora. The original Indiana Jones trilogy that spans the 1980s still holds up as one of the best action franchises in film history, starring the iconic Harrison Ford. The first film, Raiders of the Lost Ark, is basically a perfect adventure movie. Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom can't quite live up to its predecessor, but still has its defenders, and Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade brings us the can't-miss super team of Ford and Sean Connery as Indy's father. Even if you've seen them dozens of times, the Indiana Jones films are the kind of experience that don't get dull with time. The early 1980s was a very fruitful time for horror cinema and produced several highly influential films that launched careers and paved the way for the genre's prevalence through the decade. Unknown filmmaker Sam Raimi released a movie he made out in the woods with his friends and launched a new wave of splattering supernatural horror. The Evil Dead not only launched a franchise, but it also launched the careers of Raimi and star Bruce Campbell. It's a film that courted both controversy and a rabid fan following thanks to its extreme content and wicked sense of humor, and launched a wave of low-budget, gory, often darkly comic films in its wake. Raimi's fingerprints are still all over the horror landscape today, and this is the film that launched it all. People who have never seen Tootsie might simply dismiss it as that comedy where Dustin Hoffman cross-dresses. Well, that is indeed the linchpin of the film's plot. Sidney Pollack's movie about a desperate actor who decides to be a woman to land a job is much more than a one-note joke. The film has gone down in history as not just one of the best films of the 1980s, but as one of the best American films of all time.
You are the first woman character who is her own person, who can assert her own personality without robbing someone of theirs. You're a breakthrough lady for us.
Dustin Hoffman is, of course, relentlessly entertaining as he dons drag. But the film also has something more to say about the sexist, commercialistic drive of the 1980s, which still holds true today. It's a film about changing attitudes, changing times, and changing people, all wrapped up in a delightful comedic shell. It's as rewarding on the first watch as it is every time you return. Cold War films became big, bold metaphors in the 1980s, and they were often just an excuse to cheer for the American way of life, and Red Dawn is a great example of that. The film tells the story of a group of teenagers trying to not just survive, but triumph in the midst of World War III and a communist invasion of America. The actual war is happening largely in the background, which means the audience mostly just gets to savor the exploits of the Wolverines, led by stars like Charlie Sheen, Patrick Swayze, and Leah Thompson. If you're looking for a film that stands as a very clear testament to the American movie landscape at the time, Red Dawn is a good place to start. The 1980s were a particularly robust period when it came to various forms of raunchy comedy, and there were a few filmmakers who were going to live up to that standard with rapid-fire jokes, countless sight gags, and actors who were willing to go the extra mile for comedy gold.
Why should I tell you? Maybe this'll help. The Still don't think I should tell you.
Can you spot me at 20? How about now?
All right.
One of the best examples of this comes in the form of The Naked Gun, the first film in a trilogy created by Jim Abrams, Pat Proft, and the Zucker brothers based on their short-lived TV series Police Squad. The film is a delightful send-up of serious cop dramas and follows Detective Frank Drebin, played by the incomparable Leslie Nielsen, as he tries to protect the Queen of England during her visit to the United States. The film is just wall-to-wall gags delivered by the entire cast, and it's a reminder that there was no other comedy star quite like Leslie Nielsen.
Follow that car.
Let's definitely check your mirror. Signal. Now pull into traffic.
Raunchy comedies were all the rage in the 1980s, but there was a particular focus on films about a ragtag band of misfits who get the better of their authority figures through open defiance and behind-the-back silliness. It's how we got films like Stripes and Revenge of the Nerds, and it's also how we got the Police Academy series. The first film in the franchise follows a group of wannabe cops as they head into the academy and face off against stern, often cruel supervisors. As the film goes on, they prove that they can be great cops while also being complete idiots. The film is packed with memorable performances, but if you're watching it now, the best part might turn out to be Michael Winslow's uncanny sound effects. Purple Rain still stands as an entertaining film, in part because it really does feel like nothing more than an excuse to tout the stylish, sensual appeal that Prince had in the mid-1980s. The Purple One's film works on a purely entertaining level, but then it goes deeper. When you really sit down and watch Purple Rain, what you find is a surprisingly emotionally satisfying story about trauma, recovery, and breaking cycles of abuse through creativity. Prince is both vulnerable and commanding in the lead role. Morris Day is an absolute scene stealer, and by the time of that final number, you'll be standing and cheering along with the in-movie audience. What made the 1980s slasher boom great for those who were fans of the subgenre was the moments when filmmakers decided to go beyond the roots of the boom and instead just went as off the rails as possible. You can see the fruits of that labor in films like A Nightmare on Elm Street, Chopping Mall, and of course, Child's Play. In some ways, Child's Play is the ultimate 1980s slasher movie story, and that it is basically a metaphor for consumerism coming for us in the form of an evil product. That wicked little metaphor is hanging over everything, but it's also just a full-tilt dark comedy horror show full of creative kills. And no matter how used to seeing him you might be, Chucky still has the power to scare you over the course of Child's Play's 90 minutes. When we look back on a pop culture decade as wild as the 1980s, it's intriguing to look at the films that audiences and critics didn't immediately latch onto that eventually became cult classics. Today, Blade Runner ranks as one of the greatest science fiction films ever made, lauded as a groundbreaking piece of dark, futuristic storytelling and one of the finest works in director Ridley Scott's career. When it first debuted, though, Scott's film earned a lackluster reception despite its dazzling visuals, amazing cast, and unforgettable soundtrack. Now, we can look back on Blade Runner with the benefit of hindsight in the form of Scott's final cut of the film, which removes things like the dull voiceover from the original release and adds back in key scenes that layer deeper meaning into the film. Martin Scorsese has produced at least one masterpiece every decade since the 1970s, delivering a diverse and exciting filmography that's so much more than the gangster films for which he is most famous. Though later classics of the decade would follow, Scorsese started the 1980s with one of his most dynamic masterpieces, Raging Bull. The black and white film is the story of Jake "The Bronx Bull" LaMotta, a legendary boxer determined to be the best and toughest fighter of his generation. Led by Robert DeNiro, who earned his second Oscar for the role, the film follows LaMotta through personal and professional triumphs and torments as he tries to balance his violent career with his often tumultuous family life. Brilliant supporting performances from Joe Pesci and Kathy Moriarty complete the picture, and Raging Bull remains an essential part of the Scorsese canon. Movie subgenres are usually not invented overnight. You can't necessarily point to one film that's the first slasher movie or the first romantic comedy. That's why we can't really call Lethal Weapon the first buddy cop movie, particularly not when films like 48 Hours came before it. That said, the film has emerged as the definitive buddy cop movie in the years since its 1987 release. It follows the now classic formula: two mismatched cops learning to work together to save the day. Mel Gibson and Danny Glover have amazing chemistry, and the whole film has this sense of unhinged energy that's hard to replicate. Lethal Weapon launched a franchise with 3 sequels and a TV series, but none of them can top the original.
Raj, meet your new partner.
I'm too old for this.
Sometimes the stereotypical 80s action movie experience is exactly what you want it to be, full of corny dialogue and oiled-up men ready to brawl. Bloodsport is definitely that kind of movie.
This is for you, Shidoshi.
Jean-Claude Van Damme's breakout film casts him as a U.S. Army captain who decides to go AWOL so he can head to Hong Kong and fight in a secret, illegal martial arts tournament against contenders from around the world. Along the way, he forges friendships, makes enemies, and reveals through copious flashbacks why the tournament is so important to him. Bloodsport has a lot going for it, even if you're an 80s action fan. Plus, it features Van Damme doing his famous splits over and over again to great effect. Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more Looper videos about your favorite stuff are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.